Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the show made by the Crime Junkie Ashley Flowers for those who are Crime Junkie AF. So if you're new, welcome. Me too. But I'm glad that you're along for the ride. And I swear this show came at the perfect time because the goal was to talk about big headline-making type cases. And I didn't know if we would have one every single month. I had no clue how I was going to follow up last month's episode on John O'Keefe's case, which, by the way, if you are not following the trial, quit your full-time job. It is the stuff of movies. I'm going to try and maybe do a recap when the prosecution gets through with their side of things, which might be in 2026 the way it's going, but TBD. Either way, I'm moving on. Today, I want to tell you about the case that I've been eyeballs deep in for the last month. Court docs out the wazoo. And I'm dissecting this one with my new Crime Junkie BFF, renowned death investigator Barbara Butcher.
Hey, Ashley.
Hello. I say BFF because if you're listening to this live or you didn't see the episode before, Barbara and I actually did a whole hour-long episode right before this one just talking about her career, the cases she's worked. This woman has street cred, you guys. So you have to check it out. I need to dive into this case. I have been itching to talk to you about it, and I specifically wanted you for a reason because there is some really interesting forensic stuff happening with this case.
There sure is, and this case is a roller coaster. This one's knocked me out.
A couple times. You said you fell out of your chair.
Yeah.
And it's one that has made national headlines. So for those true crime aficionados who subscribe to the "it's always the husband" theory, this is a case that has a very clear suspect that they have been quick to point to. But there's some weird evidence. There's a lack of evidence that gave the defense attorneys a lot to work with. Charges were filed and then dropped. The defendant even brought suit against those who investigated him. But recently, the pendulum has swung again, and there is a lot of questions in the case of Suzanne Morphew.
A cold case that gripped the headlines.
In one of the most high-profile murder cases in the state.
It's the Colorado mom who vanished on Mother's Day 4 years ago.
We are left with many more questions than answers.
What actually did happen to Suzanne Morphew?
So again, I'm with Barbara Butcher because the newest evidence that has been released in this case is Suzanne's autopsy report. And you are going to help me not only understand it, but try to interpret it and what this could mean for the case. I also have a ton of questions about the scene itself. And you were a death investigator, but that doesn't just mean with bodies, right? Like you actually, can you give just a little bit of recap if people didn't hear the first episode?
Sure. My job is to investigate the body in the scene and to get the context of the death. However, we always say the body belongs to me and the scene belongs to the police. But the scene is mine, too. Everything is mine.
Everything is Barbara's, you guys.
And I've got plenty to say about this one.
I can't wait. So, all right, I'm going to give a high-level overview of the case as Barbara and I break it down with the caveat of the fact that you guys should go read the court documents for yourself to really understand this. There are so many details I am going to have to omit just for time's sake. But the way that Suzanne's case started was on Mother's Day of 2020. So she and her family live in Colorado. Her two daughters are away on a camping trip. Her husband had just left early that morning for a job in Broomfield, Colorado, which is 167 miles away. And they've all been texting her to wish her a happy Mother's Day or trying to call her, whatever. And no one can get a hold of her. Her daughters even say the texts aren't even being marked as delivered. So they're starting to get concerned. And they do a little phone tag. And at some point, one of them calls the neighbor to say, hey, can you go look? Is mom there? Is her car there? Is her bike there that she normally goes mountain biking with? And at one point, the neighbor calls back, no, I can't find her. And Barry's like, okay, Barry's the husband. You need to call 911. And so the police or the sheriff's office is then notified of a missing person. They go out to Suzanne's home, the scene around it, because they believe that she's out on her bike somewhere. And one of the first people that responders talk to is actually one of the daughter's boyfriends at the time. So the boyfriend basically tells them, listen, she's a big mountain biker. I think he was actually even one of the people who helped her learn how to mountain bike. And what was strange is he's like, she normally takes her car with her and takes the bike with her, but her car's here and the bike isn't. And they ask, the question any crime junkie would ask, any good investigator asks, how's the marriage? How are things going? And it's so strange in the video. He looks at his dad And his dad's like, you need to answer, like, be truthful. And he's like, well, they fight a lot, but it's like normal marriage stuff. And they specifically asked, does she ride a lot on 225, this road by their house? And he's like, no, like I don't think she would ever ride there because it's almost like uphill, like too difficult to ride. He's like, you would get off your bike and have to like push it up. And we find out they're asking him about 225 because by the time they're talking to him, which is really soon, they've already found Suzanne's blue mountain bike. And it was off the side of the road, but the road just kind of drops off into a ravine. And her bike is there with the front tire like facing down. And there's actually seen from the body cam footage of the officer who originally went and found it, who, by the way, just like touches the fuck out of that bike.
Yes.
I don't know if you watched the video.
He made love to it.
I mean, I was like, stop. I mean, and I don't know I know they probably thought it was a missing person, but when you find a bike like this,
yeah.
I mean, to me, and again, I'm a crime junkie, but I'm like, red flag, maybe don't.
Yeah,
don't.
Absolutely.
At some point, I thought he was going to lick it. Like, I was like, stop touching that fucking bike.
And don't tramp all over that scene. Why wasn't it?
Everyone.
Why wasn't it roped off?
Not even just where they found the bike, but the road itself.
The road, yeah. Dirt road, tracks, all kinds of things out there. All kinds of evidence up there. But people soon were gathering around, and everyone was traipsing through the scene and touching the bike, including the husband.
The husband eventually. I know. Now, there's one screenshot I took, and I'm being my own little crime scene investigator, and I like put a circle around it. I put it in the document for you to look at, because the theory that kind of comes up is pretty quickly is they're like, this seems staged. They said they say there's no evidence of tire tracks on that road. Again, everyone's walking over it. I don't know how much you can actually say that. But there's no damage to the bike. Everything looks fine. And they're like, we think someone just threw this over to stage a scene. There's like a part where I see where it looks like the grass is like smushed. Like, is it possible that somebody was down there? Or
anything's possible.
Yeah.
But
fair.
is it probable? I don't know. This looks very odd. I don't, if you think about bicycle being driven off the road, let's say a car forces you off the road, where you lose control. You go off, do you slide all the way down this slope? Do you go down this far? It looks like
it is pretty far.
It's far down. And then what happens after that? Do you lay down in this area of grass here, this depression, because you're hurt? Well, where's the footprints? Where's the disturbance of the vegetation? The torn pieces of grass? I don't see it. But admittedly, look, this is a body cam picture.
Yeah, and then they didn't stay on the scene very long, and this is the only thing that's been released that we have. So they end up contacting Barry. And Barry says he gets this call while he's out at a job site that the police are coming. He tells the people he's working with, like, I've got a family emergency, I've got to go. And he does end up making it to the scene by the time it starts to get dark. Now, when he gets there, he's asking a lot of questions. And here's what's interesting. So in a later arrest affidavit, they will point to the fact that he kept saying it was a mountain lion, which I get. Which is a little bananas. There's no blood at the scene. There's whatever, but it's not also completely accurate. I thought that because what he comes out of his car saying is like, was there a crash? Could it have been a mountain? Like, he's asking what happened here.
Yeah.
He's scared, and there's some back and forth about the bike, and then they ask him, okay, well, when is the last time you saw your wife? And he says that it was when he left that morning for the job site. Sometime he said around 5 a.m, and when he left, she's sound asleep. They didn't interact because he didn't want to wake her up, and then he just couldn't get a hold of her. So they start getting suspicious pretty quickly, and I think it's because of one thing in particular, at least for me. And again, they say the bike looks staged, but they actually pinged her phone to figure out, and I assume because they were able to do that thinking that she could be hurt or in danger or whatever, they ping her phone and they're like, okay, it last pinged in that area, which is still right by their house.
Yep.
So it's pretty rural. It might use the same tower. But it pinged around 4 a.m., which means that was before he said he left the house. And there had been no activity since then.
Yep.
And everyone says she she had her phone all the time. She would have rode with her phone. It is,
Of course.
it's like 8 p.m. now.
Yeah, it's dangerous to go riding without your phone.
They start looking at this, I think, again, despite touching everything, I think they start thinking they've got something on their hands. They start searching, they start looking at things, maybe the way they should have from the beginning, pretty critically. They find that her camel pack, the backpack she wears with water, that she always rides with, and there's pictures of her all over her Instagram riding with this camel pack, that's in her car.
Yeah.
Which, like we said, that her daughter's boyfriend said she always usually took her car to go. They're not only searching the house, but they also send some search dogs out. Barry gets them a scent item from their closet. So dogs go out and search. Yeah.
There was something in that closet. Her padded bike shorts and her bike gloves.
Yeah, and that's what I didn't know. Does she have more than, I assume she was like an avid biker, that she would have more than one pair?
We're going to get to that.
Question mark?
But also, who searched that house? The family members and a couple of deputies. Did they do anything to protect that scene?
Nothing.
This is a potential crime scene. No, they had family traipsing through there, just like the John Benet Ramsey case. Everybody come on in and let's have a look.
Colorado's not doing well.
They're not doing well at all.
Yeah, they have a deputy walking with him because you see it from the body cam footage. But to your point, nothing is roped off. They're not considering this a scene by any means at that point. But they are noticing weird things. So there was one of the guest rooms, I guess, had all of the bedding off of it. And it was a room that was their daughter's, who was like away at college or something. And, they start to wonder, like, well, where's all of that? The bedding is in the dryer, it turns out. And Barry says, well, she was getting ready. Our daughters were coming back. She was getting the room ready for them.
Right. They were out camping.
So he has an excuse for it.
Yeah.
Now, while they're out searching outside of the home for Suzanne, they end up finding her helmet 0.87 miles away from her bike.
In the opposite direction, right?
Yeah, but so this is a question for you. So they think, everyone keeps saying this is more proof that it was staged, and I don't understand why this is more proof that it was staged.
I don't buy that. No, I don't.
Okay.
Because let's just put a little scenario out. Just suppose some nut ran her off the road, jumped out, grabbed her, put her in the car, and threw her bike down. Now, she's still wearing a bike helmet, isn't she? When she's abducted, she didn't stop to take it off. And then they proceed wherever they're going to be, and the guy throws it out the window.
That's what I think.
That's perfectly reasonable.
Yeah.
But also, someone who did intentionally and knowingly kill her, say a person that knew her, and threw her bike down there to make it look like she crashed.
Forgot the helmet.
Oh, I forgot the damn helmet. It's in the car. Now I got to go throw that somewhere else. So there's a lot of ways to go here.
Now, I think it's pretty clear that they set their sights on Barry, Suzanne's husband, pretty quickly. And you can see why. So when they ask Barry about his marriage, he says, it's perfect. Which, wrong answer. Because there's almost no one who would call their marriage perfect when they start talking to people. Even their daughters, so again, one is in college, one lives with them. The one that lives with them even says that they were both in a, quote, unsafe space emotionally, and that things weren't great. They fought a lot. They say that they were still fine. I feel his daughters have been very supportive of him. And it's interesting because what Suzanne tells her friends, because they end up finding text messages that Suzanne sent her friend, and what she tells her friend is that her daughters were like, you need to leave, you should leave him, that she was really open with her daughters.
Yeah.
But we only have that from Suzanne in the text, and then what we get from the daughters is that they're very supportive of their dad, and at least in these initial statements to police, they kind of downplay any kind of problems in the relationship, potential emotional abuse, stuff like that.
Sure, who wouldn't? It's your daddy.
It's your dad. So they find these texts to her friend Sheila. These are the ones that they kind of really point to over and over. And these texts weren't necessarily like right before. They were in the months leading up to this, where she just is kind of telling her friend about how awful her marriage is and that she feels that he's emotionally abusive and controlling and she wants a divorce, but he won't even speak of divorce. And, the thing kind of playing in the background of all of this is I grew up in like a very religious home, and like there's a lot of that you see come through in this, where He uses scripture against her when she doesn't want to keep doing the same thing over, and you've got to forgive someone 70 times 7. And I'm like, all right, calm down. I know this brand of man.
Yep.
So she paints a picture to her friend that it's a very unhappy marriage. And to back that up even more is authorities find her notes app on her phone. So they don't actually find her phone. They're only able to pull data from what they're able to get from the cloud, Apple.
30 days worth.
30
But
days.
here's the funny thing. With a subpoena, you can get from Apple, you can get 180 days. So why did they stop at 30?
I don't know why they only did 30. My guess, which is completely uneducated, is they have been very clearly honed in on Barry and specifically on this 2 days, this couple of hours. And again, more is always better in my mind.
Sure.
But I think they were so narrowly focused that stuff that actually could even help them, they didn't bother getting.
Yep.
And I don't know how subpoenas work. I don't know if it's more difficult to get.
No.
Okay.
A subpoena is a subpoena. You can get up to 180 days. That's, a reasonable request. And the company gives it to you. And that's that.
Wild.
So why maybe they said, oh, look, 30 days is easier. No, it's not. It's all the same data. You dump it.
And I wonder, too, they were able to get Barry's phone because he's obviously
Sure.
there and turns it over. Again, they're making a case here.
Good,
And I almost wonder if the stuff beyond 30 days just didn't help or made things harder to explain.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Maybe not.
So in her notes app, so the morning of or the day before, I think it was on the 9th, so she goes missing on the 10th. The day before on her phone at 7-something in the morning, her notes app saves or backs up this list of what they call grievances against Barry. And they're some of it's a little in code. It just says monkey app, fizz abuse, mental abuse while drinking, NYE, name calling, said I only need for money sign, women on Facebook, good for business. I mean, it's this long list. Threatened to jump out of car, gun, shame and guilt daily for not meeting expectations. Nothing to do with infidelity, everything to do with your character and who you are at core. Your lack of control over me equals insecurities equals a sick relationship. Verbal abuse, writing checks for cash out of business account. Writing money from INV account without asking or discussing. Monex in your name only. This is important because it comes up later. Monex is it's some kind of money transfer.
Yeah,
app.
it's a code that transfers money from, internationally especially.
Yes.
It's very easy to do wire transfers that way.
So, accused me of BF, boyfriend, and hydro 5-6. So again, she's missing on 5-10, and there's this accusation of a boyfriend. Wrote in Al-Anon book, which is a sobriety thing, right? Al-Anon is...
Al-Anon is for the families and friends of alcoholics.
Okay.
It helps them to deal with, the problem of their loved ones.
So that's what I haven't heard is what their relation to that is or who in the family might have been. Barry makes a lot of accusations later about Suzanne abusing prescription drugs and drinking a lot.
No, then she would be at, Narcotics Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous or something. But Al-Anon, some people go there just because their partner is dysfunctional, not necessarily a primary alcoholic.
Interesting. Okay.
But there you go. But what's hydro?
I don't know.
Accused me of BF, boyfriend, and hydro. Hydro is a very interesting word. All right.
On 5-6. Knew I was looking at phone in bonus, ? And I don't know what that means either. So there's a long list. I think it's something like 60 things. It's interesting. So this all came out in a court document. I would love to know what Suzanne thought. So a lot of the messages we even get weren't even on the phone anymore. They're pulling them just from the records.
Yeah.
I feel like what would have told us maybe what she thought was this journal that she kept. So she had a daily devotional book along with a journal, a leather-bound journal that they said she kept. But that journal is completely missing. Nobody. And they find a binding of a book in the fireplace.
Yep.
So potentially that book is no longer and was in the fireplace.
And it was burnt.
The other physical evidence that they end up finding at the house is they say that there's a cracked door frame leading into the primary bedroom. And this, I'm like, I don't know, man. So it's when you say cracked door frame, whatever I was imagining before I saw the picture wasn't quite it. It is literally like where the locking mechanism meets the frame. There is just like a line through it.
And I would get right up close on that line and I would smell it. It's pine. And when pine cracks, you can smell fresh pine, right? And I would look in there and see, is it dust? Is it old? I can tell immediately if that's a new crack or an old crack.
You can?
Of course. Well, no, I guess I'm not a miracle worker, but it's pretty damn easy. You look in there, there's fresh wood, there's still splinters. It would be a lighter color than that outside, which is varnished there. So yeah, I would smell it, examine it, look for dust in it.
And they don't mention doing any of that. So the only thing they mention is that the previous owners of the home, because they only moved into this home in 2018, so that's 2 years before this is happening. The previous owners of the home say that wasn't there when they moved out. That's 2 years ago.
Yeah, so what?
I mean, also, like, if this was in my house, I don't know that I'd be making even note of it.
Yeah, it's not that big a thing.
Could have happened any time in 2 years. So it's something they make note of. What does it mean? I don't know.
Not much to me.
Other physical evidence on Barry himself, his person, on his arm, there are, I would call it 2.5 scratches that they think could be from nails.
Yep.
He says they were from bushes.
No.
I think you said when he was outside or hiking. You said no? For sure no?
I don't think so. Look, again, I'm not having the actual photograph in front of me except this replicated one here electronically. But these are nail marks. You see the size? You see the pattern of it?
Nail marks in dragging like across?
Just a little. There's not a bush leaves a scratch, a thin, longer scratch. These look a little deeper. You see, especially on that one on the far right. You'll see that's a little deeper there. And then that second one has a crusting over. So obviously serum or plasma, blood came from the blood and sealed it up. Now, this is the time where you love to have visuals because somebody said, well, why aren't there scratches on his hands or other places? When a big man grabs you, what do they grab you by? Your arms, your upper arms, and they hold you there. So if your upper arms are restricted, what can you scratch? Right here. Here. Can you scratch his face? No, he's holding you like this. You can't get his face. You can't punch him.
I also think if the way that I was thinking about it is if he grabbed her around her body.
Yep.
And you go like up by your chin.
That's your instinct, is to grab that arm. And these look like nail marks to me. And again, I'm going to put the caveat on it that without the original photo, which I can look at with a magnifying glass, I can't say for sure. But it doesn't look like bush scratches to me.
Here's a question I have. Spoiler alert at the beginning, I said you're here to talk about the autopsy report. They end up finding Suzanne's body. It's after years that they find her. Would there still be DNA under her nails if she did scratch someone?
If she had nails, yeah, there might be.
What do you mean if she had? I mean, like if these are scratches if they were made by Suzanne, wouldn't she have had to have nails to make them?
I mean the way in which she was found.
I see.
We'll get to that.
Okay. So they see that. Other than those two, I say 2.5 because the other, it's very tiny. Other than those, there does not seem to be any physical evidence on Barry's body that he was in an altercation, that he has defensive wounds. They also find a needle cover to a syringe in the dryer where they say that the sheets from that bed were. And I'm like talking very, very specifically because what you'll hear a lot of times is that it was a dart cap. And this actually gets conflated because it goes into this theory that they end up having, but it wasn't a dart cap. It was a cap to a syringe needle. So the theory that they end up like kind of forming, seeing all of this, is that they thought it was clear Suzanne was going to leave Barry. Things had been building up for a long time. He was realizing he couldn't control her anymore. And he killed her.
Mm-hmm.
Killed her with...
Sedated her, maybe.
Sedated her, yeah. And they do have this specific theory that he used some kind of animal tranquilizer to do it, specifically pointing to this syringe needle, which they keep calling a dart cap. And Barry is a big hunter.
Oh, yeah.
I think they even had a deer farm back when they lived in Indiana. And I mean, this dude, like his home is antlers, deer head galore. It's a little disturbing. But
yeah.
So they have their sights set on him, but they don't actually have any proof, not only that he did something, but that anything has happened. It is still early days, and Suzanne is still just a missing person.
Sure.
Now, some other reasons they think that he is looking suspicious is as they're getting more and more digital data from his phone, his locations, his truck, he's got some excavator equipment, the Bobcat that they keep looking at.
Yeah, completely a red herring. They kept harping on this Bobcat that it looked like the front blade was clean and new and maybe there was a dusty footprint on it.
Yeah, nothing.
So what does that mean? That you went and unearthed a big area to bury a body in or took a rock off a cave
They're
opening?
obsessed with the Bobcat.
Obsessed.
But spoiler alert, nothing ends up. They test the blade. They test nothing. They have a cadaver dog go in there. Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Bobcat's a little bit of like you said, a red herring. But as they're getting all this other data, there's just all this weird stuff. So not only are they getting digital data from his phone and his car, but they're also going to the hotel he was at the day that Suzanne goes missing. So he leaves at 5 o'clock in the morning to go to this job site 167 miles away. And he says initially that when he gets the call that he needs to come back, his wife is missing, he's on the job site, he has to leave. It turns out he was like chilling in his hotel room at the time.
That's correct.
They know that because of surveillance footage from the hotel. He was in there for a long time. And then there's also all this weird stuff he's doing around town that day. So he goes to, I think it's something like 5 different dumpster sites.
Sure. Clothing store, McDonald's, another hotel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 5 different sites, 5 different dumpsters, and pushing things down into them.
Taking stuff out of his truck.
On videotape.
Videotape. But you can't see everything.
No,
I mean,
no.
You can see like a camo thing one time, you can see a pair of boots one time, but then it's just like these grocery bags almost sometimes. And he says that this is just what he does. He doesn't like to pay fees to dump things, and so he goes and just dumps it at random dumpsters.
Cleans out his car.
Which was freaking filthy, by the way.
Right, which was a mess.
Which was a mess.
When they looked at it, there was plenty of garbage in there.
He could have cleaned out more.
Could have. Maybe it was really bad before.
So he doesn't, the thing is too, he doesn't remember what he threw away. Is that suspicious? Or is it like, if I was throwing away trash, I couldn't tell you what I actually threw away?
Yeah, probably. Well, we could go either way with that.
Yeah. You can go either way in a lot of things in this case.
We sure can.
So the activity itself is suspicious. Why are you doing that? That's not, it might be normal behavior for Barry. It's not normal behavior for most people. The person who came to help him with his work, they had gone to his room after him, and they said that the hotel room just smelled horribly of bleach or chlorine. Now, the people who work at the hotel say the room was right above the pool.
Yeah, so that would smell.
It's COVID time. Like, things are getting extra disinfected. Maybe not. The other thing that they have is on his phone, what's so strange is so many calls and texts between him and Suzanne were deleted.
Yeah. And someone said, or maybe he said, there was some porn sites. Oh. But then we hear later, it wasn't really a porn site. It was a pop-up ad for a porn site.
So it's not just calls and texts. There's some strange web searches about how to make, one of them's how do you make a girl orgasm. There are, at least one of them I remember was like so long and specific.
Yeah.
That to me seems like pop-up. It wasn't the kind of thing that I think anyone like types into a search bar.
Yeah.
But yeah, initially he was like, I don't do that. I don't believe in porn. I don't watch that stuff. And then it was pop-ups. Mm-hmm. But that so much stuff is gone from his phone. His phone also shows him going in and out of airplane mode.
Yes, purportedly, and I say it with a great deal of caution, it was rumored that, it was determined by the download of the phone and the analytics that it was in and out of airplane mode, meaning it wasn't trackable at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And now there is something else to mention, though, here. He was supposed to, on that Sunday, the 10th, he had told his coworker, his employee, that he was going to pick her up at 5 p.m.
I
to
know.
go to the job. And no, he left at 5 a.m. and never said to her, I'm not picking you up. Just didn't explain it. He just called her later and said, we're going to need another person here. Bring another person. She was like, all right, whatever.
Which, to your point, it's 5 p.m. If you have a job on Monday, makes sense.
Sure.
It's Mother's Day.
Yeah, you should be there.
You think?
Yeah.
But maybe, the girls aren't home.
Sure, the girls were out with their friends.
But
whatever.
it is strange that he didn't even tell this coworker, hey, I'm not picking you up. Hey, I'm going 12 hours early.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff that doesn't make sense. And it keeps not making sense because even that him leaving at 5 a.m., he says he leaves at 5, sees her sleeping. Well, they're like, surprise, surprise, we have your truck data, and we have you at 4 a.m.
Yes.
going the opposite direction of where you need to go in Broomfield. And right around, and again, this is very general areas, going around the area where, I don't know if it was her bike or her helmet, but one of those, the helmet was found.
Yeah, 0.87 miles from the house, opposite direction.
He says he's a super hunter, and so he's like going, and he's like, I could go right, I could go left, and he's like, and I look, and I see some, I can't even remember what kind of big animal it was, some big animal.
Big moose or an elk.
And he's like, I gotta go look at this thing. And so he drives to look at this thing, and then he decides to go the other way and go to his job site.
Turn around.
Which initially, again, never part of the narrative.
Right.
Like only when he is presented with evidence. And this is a common thing with him, is that he has this story, when he is presented with evidence, the story changes.
It evolves.
It evolves. I like that. It evolves.
It's a good word. Good word.
And this happened again with something else. So one of the things that they have are all these GPS locations. And they actually have a pretty big home. It's this $1.7 million thing. And I didn't realize that you could track someone physically, like room to room. Yeah, well, you can't, it turns out. They say they have tracked him when he got home that day because on her phone, and I think that this is important to know, on her phone, well, they end up narrowing down like the time frame that they think something happened to her. And at this time, they think he comes home and they see him like bouncing all over the house.
This is on Saturday, the 9th, the day before Mother's Day.
Yes.
The afternoon, 2:30 something.
Yes. And they're like, your phone's bouncing all over the house. And so they come up with this theory that he got home and he's chasing her around.
Yes.
And so, and again, that was never part of his story. When they present him with this, he doesn't say, and this is where it's like, he doesn't say, that's not what happened. Like, I wasn't doing anything. He tells them that he often chases chipmunks around their property. He shoots chipmunks. He's shot like 85 chipmunks.
Oh,
I know. He's very impressive. So he puts himself at his home with some kind of gun shooting chipmunks. I mean, it later comes out that they actually couldn't track his location.
That's right, because static drift. Now, he had poor cell phone reception at his home, ostensibly. And if you think about those satellites that do all this tracking, when you're driving in your car and using GPS and it'll say, turn right 100 feet ahead. You move 10 feet and suddenly it says turn 25 feet. That's because you're bouncing off different satellites and each of them is tracking you at a millisecond in time. If you lose signal, even just for a second, now suddenly it jumps. And the really telling thing about this was they said that they could track him running around the house at approximately 45 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So I thought, wait a minute, is he driving around the house? No. So how does it move 45 miles an hour, person? You can't. But static drift says that you will pick up a signal here, and then 2 seconds later, pick it up 100 feet away, and that means I'm moving 45 miles an hour. So this is not foolproof stuff. It's technology. It has its flaws. And in this case, we have a weak signal. So we can't really say that he was chasing her around the house. Maybe he walked from point to point, as a person is allowed to in their own home.
But why? So why tell the chipmunk story? That's where it gets. That's where I get.
I have nothing to say.
Yeah. Okay. They have more and more stuff that they end up finding. And every time they find something, something that Barry has an explanation. Not one that he had ever given them before, but Barry has an evolving story. Well, then they find this spy pen.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems that Suzanne was convinced that Barry was having an affair.
Yep.
And she had asked her friend, the same one she had been texting with for, all those months ago, she had asked her friend, I don't think like I can buy it without him knowing. Can you buy it for me? Her friend buys her the spy pen. But what the spy pen ends up revealing, there's no evidence that Barry was having an affair. Not on anything. I mean, to this day, there's no evidence that Barry was having an affair.
That's right.
There is evidence that Suzanne was having an affair.
Big evidence.
Big evidence. So she is on that pen talking to her lover, this man who they end up finding out is this person she had gone to school with, I think back in high school, and he still lives in Michigan. And again, they used to live in Indiana. By the time they locate this man, Suzanne had been missing for 6 months.
Yep.
And he hadn't said a word.
Not one word.
And he knew she was missing.
And this was a long-term affair.
Years.
Yeah.
They had started the affair right after she moved to Colorado in 2018. It was mostly over the phone. His daughter saw a text message or something. He kind of cut things off. But then things picked back up. And they were pretty sneaky. They were contacting each other on LinkedIn. That's how they did a lot of their chatting. And then they would go on WhatsApp and all these places where you can keep your communication really private.
And they would meet.
And then they would meet. So there were a number of times where they met up. They had a physical relationship as well as an emotional one. She was telling him that he was the love of her life.
Yeah. But he had a wife and 6 kids.
So when she goes missing, he finds out, because this is the kicker. So they were actually speaking at the time that they think Barry came home. And the police, what they theorize is that's what set him over the edge.
Yeah.
That he found out she was having this affair. He chased her around and killed her with a dart. And they believe this dart thing because when they present him with this needle syringe cap that they found, and they say, well, have you ever used this? He said, yes, I used this on my deer farm. Yes, I think I might have had this chemical, this BAM, which is 3 different chemicals in my work shed. I don't think I have it anymore. And they're like, well, would you have ever had a need to use it here? And he says, well, actually, yes, I would shoot deer and tranquilize them so I could go cut the horns off or antlers off.
Yes.
And then let them go, and I would keep them for like extra money or whatever.
You sell them for big money. People want to look like hunters without going through the trouble.
Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, why would it be in your home? And he's like, well, maybe if I was in the house and I like shot it through an open door, but I'm still standing in the house, maybe that's why something would be in the house. And they're like, okay, well, when would this have happened? And he says, I think the last time I did it was maybe end of April.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she goes missing at the beginning of May.
Yeah.
But there is no chemical in his home.
That's right.
They
Not
cannot find any chemical in his home.
And it's not easy to get. You have to get it prescribed by a veterinarian. And, certainly he used it a lot back at his deer farm, and he used it, he said, recently in Colorado to take their horns. So obviously he had some way of getting it.
Now, the other thing that I find interesting on this spy pen, and I'll come back to her affair in a minute, is she had put the pen in his truck at one point, I guess assuming that she thought maybe he was going to meet someone. And it doesn't catch Barry meeting anyone, but it catches him listening to a lot of forensic files.
Yeah, a crime.
Which is like a little bizarre. And this is where I'm like, okay, I mean, God forbid anyone put a spy pen in my car. That's all they're going to hear.
Yep.
But my question that nobody has addressed, or I don't even know if they've asked, is like, was Barry a crime junkie? Is this something that he's always been listening to? Or
is he learning?
Yes. Or is, shortly before something happens to his wife, is all of a sudden he taking notes?
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
I haven't seen anyone ask that question or touch on that. Now, they say, to go back to the affair, there is this picture of Suzanne, which they keep calling the proof of life picture. This is her last proof of life. It was a selfie that she took while she was laying out and sent to Jeff, her boyfriend. And This was at that 2-something time. And they say this
37-ish.
Yeah, they say this is the last time that we know she was alive. And I say, is it?
No. Why? Just because it's the last picture we have
Exactly.
of her?
The one thing I scoured the internet. I can't find when the last time someone actually spoke to her or saw her.
Right.
And it's driving me nuts.
Yep.
Because also, it was 50 degrees.
Yeah.
Why?
He said she was laying out on the lounge.
Yeah,
in the
sunbathing.
Sunbathe. 50 degrees. That's awful.
Cold?
That's cold, yeah. And, well, it's not your best time to get a suntan. But still, some people like it.
Sure. Barry, when they eventually approach him, because they're still all sights set on Barry. Again, the more they learn about the affair, the more they think this is just motive for him and plays into this theory that they already have. They seem to be not care at all that Jeff didn't come forward when he knew. They don't think it's weird that he destroyed the phone he had with Suzanne.
Oh, yeah.
Immediately after.
He said his phone dropped and the front broke, the glass.
So he had to get rid of it, the next day.
Yeah, but you can replace the glass for, I think it's about $70.
It was a work phone. Work was going to pay for it, so.
Oh, well, gee, but wow. So he replaced it with a whole new phone and all the data was wiped.
Deleted all of his accounts, so that second LinkedIn he made, he deletes everything.
Yeah. I mean, when I've gotten new phones, you transfer all the data. This time, no.
Nothing.
Right.
And he said he did it to protect Suzanne and her image, and he's so,
What a good...
always thinking of other people, Jeff.
Yeah. And was Jeff investigated? Was his home searched? Was his computer checked?
No. This is the thing. So, again, they had their sights set on Barry, and almost nothing was done. Jeff provided them pictures of receipts that from his credit card, or technically his wife's credit card.
Yes.
That shows he was supposed to have been at different stores at around the time that something is thought to have happened to Suzanne.
Yeah.
A, you can't convince me that we have the right window of time here.
Right.
And B, they did nothing to independently verify that, or that it was him.
Right. And it was his wife's credit card. And did they take a DNA sample from Jeff?
They did take a DNA sample from Jeff.
Okay, good.
So they at least covered their bases there, but they've got nothing to compare that to at this point.
That's right.
So when they approach Barry with proof that she had been having an affair, he acts completely taken aback. He says he has no idea that this was happening. He can't even imagine it. I mean, she had been accusing him of this. And this is what's kind of wild, because when you look at her messages to her friends and stuff, it's all she talks about is the fact that Barry could have been having an affair. She never even told her friends that she was.
Yeah,
which is a little
something?
Strange.
Well, I don't know. The most jealous people are usually the ones who are thinking about having affairs themselves, right?
You think?
And then they imagine everybody else is doing it too. I don't know. I've heard that said.
I just don't know why she seemed like she had no interest in him whatsoever. And I don't know why she cared so much that he might have been having an affair. I mean, maybe it was just she felt like it was her way out. If she could prove that it was him, I could see that.
Makes for a better divorce.
Yeah, fair. So he says that he had no idea about this man. He asked police over and over, tell me who it is. I just want to know his name. And they're like, we can't tell you. He says he's completely blindsided. Okay, so, the other thing he says, again, to go back to his churchy roots, he says a couple of times something to the effect that this was God, maybe this is, I couldn't understand why this happened to such a sweet woman, why this happened to us. Suzanne was a cancer survivor. Why would she go missing now? And he's like, oh, well, maybe I finally understand once he learns about the affair, that maybe this was God punishing her.
Oh, for God's sake.
I know, I literally wrote my notes, you motherfucker.
Yeah.
The one thing I have been obsessing over, though, is, again, Barry says he doesn't know about the affair ahead of time. In one of the court documents, there's a footnote. And it says, it's footnote 53 on page 46, Suzanne's list of grievances cites a transaction such as this one involving Monex, and she mentions one involving Mallory, her daughter, to Libler, who is Jeff Libler, her boyfriend, shortly before she disappears.
Uh-huh. I wonder what that was.
No, I don't know, because nobody seems to be talking about it.
Nobody followed it. Nobody followed that track down?
Nobody's even asking questions about this right now, except for me.
Yeah, I mean, bank records are as easy to track down. With a subpoena, everything all legal. It's all electronic. It's all the digital evidence is right there. Did anybody look at that?
But they used it as a footnote in their arrest affidavit later on. The only reason I found it, I would never have even looked at the footnotes except for I had done like a control find for Jeff's name.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I don't understand how could Mallory have transferred money? And there's also mention of Mallory maybe sharing an account with Barry. How could Mallory have transferred money to Jeff before Suzanne goes missing?
But she wouldn't do that, would she? The daughter? How would she even know about Jeff?
I don't know.
Who else had access to the account, to that wire transfer?
But why would you transfer money to?
Right.
What does that mean?
I don't know.
And nobody tells us what it means.
And Jeff was, what was that word? Protected, according to the police. I don't quite understand
yeah, they said that they were going to, when they went to interview him, again, when they should have been interrogating him the way they would have anyone else, they told him that they were going to protect him.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
they're protecting him.
Okay.
So that's about the 6-month mark. Over the next 6 months, nothing really happens. But at the 1-year mark, that's when they finally move in. So I have mentioned an arrest affidavit. They make a move for Barry. They arrest him for Suzanne's murder. And the theory is a lot like the one they had since the very beginning, that he found out about this affair, maybe walked in on her as she was about to or was talking to Jeff, because that's what the messages perhaps indicate, and that he lost it and tranquilized her and got rid of the evidence and got rid of her, but they don't know where she is. His car records don't show him necessarily going anywhere, though they do show that, like, in the window they think this happened, the doors are opening and closing a bunch of different times, and there's all this activity, and his phone is on silent, and they don't know the exact things, but they know he did it, except for they don't.
As we soon see.
And so they end up dropping the charges without prejudice because the case that was built against him was full of holes, and those holes were filled with bullshit.
And exculpatory evidence that would have proven him innocent, was withheld from the defense. By law, you must provide the defense with everything you have, every clue, so they can look at it too.
Well, it's not even to the defense. What they argued for this time, at least, and they argue everything later, is they're like, it should have never been put in the arrest affidavit. They're like, if the arrest affidavit, his lawyers accuse them of not only withholding information in the arrest affidavit that the judge didn't get to see to make the decision, but that they lied, like straight up lied about things too.
Yeah.
And you have this great point in your book, and we touched on it a little bit in our previous episode, advice that you had gotten from your boss, your mentor, Dr. Hirsch, when you worked in New York, who basically said something to the effect of, you're only as good as your word. Like, if the second you lie about one thing, even if you think that like it's going to help you or you're doing it for the right reasons, you lie about the one thing and it calls into question everything.
Everything is tainted. And now there's something very important, too. It's not just lying about the thing. There's a sin of omission and a sin of commission. Commission, something you purposely do, and it's wrong. But there's omission, the failure to say things that might have helped the defense. The failure, or even, I'm going to call this a sin of commission, is taking a statement and twisting it very slightly. For instance, say things like, somebody says, I heard something that could have been a gunshot. And then the police write down, witness heard a gunshot. No, he didn't. It was something that sounded like a gunshot. So phrasing is everything. Terminology is everything. You're writing cold, hard facts, but there's always an editorial bent to them. And in this affidavit, when we look at it very closely,
it's editorialized.
We see a lot of editorializing.
Yeah.
A lot of slight changing or changing of timelines.
Yeah.
And this defense team,
Killer. I do not want to be up against them, but I do want to hire them should I ever be in the hot seat.
God forbid.
God forbid. I would say the biggest point that they have on their side, and there's a number of them that I'll kind of get to one by one, but to your point of something being withheld from them, I would say there's two things. One is that apparently some of the lead people in charge, there's all these different agencies involved, and there were a number of people who called the prosecutor's office when they said they were going to arrest him, and they were like, we don't think you should do this. Like, not with what you have. You should not move forward. We don't feel good about you moving forward with this. And they were not only ignored, but that information was never given to the defense.
That's right.
And that seems pretty important if you have some of the people who are actually doing the investigating being like, there's some, I've got to find the phrasing somewhere because it's like, some like pretty strong language about how they should not.
Deeply concerned.
Yes,
things
deeply
like that.
concerned about how they should not be bringing this case.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think is the standout is there's some DNA evidence.
Mm-hmm.
So they actually did do a number of swabs and testing, and there is foreign male DNA on a number of different items, including her helmet, including her bike. And we rule out, everyone who was like touching her bike to
feeling it, touching it, loving
to hide
it,
riding it.
Yeah.
All those people get ruled out. There is still unknown male DNA. It's not Barry's. Again, they take Jeff's. It's not Jeff's. The really interesting part, and the defense knew that there was this part of it. What they didn't know until a long time later was that they swabbed the glove compartment of Suzanne's car, not Barry's car, the car that Suzanne would normally take to go ride her mountain bike. And on the glove box is unknown male DNA that when they run through CODIS, matches to sexual assault cases, unsolved sexual assault cases.
3 of them.
In Phoenix, Tempe, and Chicago.
Yes.
What?
But, does it match? It says partial match. Now,
what does that mean? So it could be like a family member?
No.
Oh.
Well, actually, it could be. Here's the thing. In CODIS, the FBI wants 13 of the loci on the DNA, the locations, to match with the evidence in order to call it a full match. And that brings it to a 1 in a trillion chance that it could be a coincidence. Okay. So if you get 13 loci matching, you're golden. They're thinking about bumping it up to 20, but whatever. So if you get a partial match, let's say 4 loci or 6 loci, what does that give you? It gives you that this chance of being this particular person is 1 in 4,000 something.
Oh.
So, yeah, it's good, but is it good enough? No. But the fact that this partial match belongs to someone who's done 3 sex crimes in 3 different areas far apart is mind-boggling.
Yeah.
I need to know. We don't have the DNA report. No. We only have the report of the result. But we don't have the confidence level that we need. We don't have the number of loci that matched. It's pretty crazy.
So you want to talk about reasonable doubt, right? That's what it's going to come down to in a court of law. And to his defense attorney's point, they knew that at the time of writing the arrest affidavit, and to not include that.
Criminal. It's a sin.
It's embarrassing.
It's unethical.
But they didn't. They didn't even make mention of
the partial match.
Yeah, of the partial match.
To a sex offense.
The other thing that I don't see anything on is there anything being done separately to figure out who that was? Because partial match, maybe it's not actually connected at all. We've got 1 in 4,000.
But the evidence from 3 separate sexual assault cases.
Listen, I'm trying to be on your side here and pretend like we not for sure.
Yeah. It is very, very unusual not to pursue the hell out of that.
In my mind, pursue it, but also even if it wasn't connected, it's the weirdest coincidence in the world.
Yeah.
But even if it's not connected, who touched her car? Was it the guy when he changed her oil?
Right, the detailer.
The mechanic, yeah. I don't know if anything's being done. I think it feels like everyone's so focused on this that we're ignoring this really important thing over here.
I'm hoping, and I feel a decent amount of confidence that yes, somebody's pursuing these 3 cases.
Oh, that's so sweet. I don't have the same confidence, but you know what? You worked for the man, so
That's right.
I'm hoping that you're right and I'm wrong.
Okay. Are they connecting them, though, or is Chicago investigating theirs and the other places are investigating theirs, or somebody linking them together and saying, hey, guys, let's all work this case?
Yeah, I don't know what they were doing before.
I don't know.
And is anyone in Colorado now trying to get to the bottom of who was in Suzanne's car, even if it had nothing to do with her murder? And it might have had something to do with her murder.
Sure might have.
We don't know. So when Barry finds out some of this stuff, he sues, I wrote in my notes, everybody.
Everybody, yeah.
I mean, quite literally, it's this long list. I mean, there are also even some, like, Jane and John Doe, like 10 Jane and John Does listed in a lawsuit. I didn't know you could sue someone and not name them.
Yeah, if you're aware of their existence within the case, you've seen them, but you don't know their exact name, I guess you can just, indict a Jane Doe or a John Doe.
Okay.
Others to be found.
So some of the other stuff that they point out in this lawsuit, because that's the kind of all we were getting from the public view until this lawsuit became public. In those early days, when they were doing searches for Suzanne, remember Barry had given them a scent item. They had actually tracked Suzanne's scent from her bicycle down the ravine to the river.
That's right. The cadaver dog, the investigative dog. I don't know if it was a cadaver dog. Yeah.
Tracking dog.
Tracked her scent.
And it's
Right
interesting because early on, before this, they always, because Barry did, again, it was a mountain lion early, then we know it's not a mountain lion, and whenever they asked him, well, what do you think happened? He's like, I don't know, maybe she's in the river. They keep asking him that, and they think it's so weird that he keeps saying the river. Well, it's because in the arrest affidavit, like, we didn't see, that, again, which they knew then, that the dog tracked to the river.
That's right. That's a huge piece of evidence.
That they left out.
Yeah.
They knew about the CODIS hits, we know that. Here's where it is, that they also knew about the static drift. So again, in the arrest affidavit, they say we can prove he's bouncing all over the house, and he's got this wild story about a chipmunk. And then here, it not only disproves, like, he can't be going 60, 45 miles an hour, or whatever it is. They say that they were told at the time they were given that information about static drift. And they're like, what we're showing you isn't reliable. Like, we're not saying that this is what happened.
Right.
And this is the phenomenon of static drift, and it goes everywhere. But they did not include that in the arrest affidavit.
Also, they did not include the thing about the phone being on airplane mode.
Mm-hmm.
That there can be instances in which it appears to be on airplane mode, but actually is not.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't understand all that. It's a very, very technical, job analyzing cell phone data.
And at like a high level, I mean, they did have terrible service. I mean, that was kind of a known thing at their Colorado home in this mountainous area. And so they're like, if it could not connect to service, that is kind of the same thing as being in airplane mode. And can you actually tell the difference? That's where
I don't know.
I don't know. In the arrest affidavit, they also claim that Barry had a second phone that wasn't located. Like, they state that as fact. And one of the things they point out is that's actually false, because the search warrant that was returned from Apple said that the second device identifier is not a second device or a phone, but instead likely identifies that Barry and Suzanne's iPhones were connected to the same iCloud account for a while.
That's right. Yeah.
Which, I mean, again, in my mind, like, if they're on the same iCloud, I feel like you can see a lot, Barry.
You can see an awful lot.
So I have more questions than answers. But they go on and on of just, like, all of these things that when you read it in its totality, you're like, oh, man, he's the most unlucky guy on the planet.
Yeah. Because everything I read in that affidavit, I was like, oh, okay, good.
Yeah,
they did telematics on his car. That's really good. They did all the cell phone stuff. They analyzed everything. Wow, this is a good investigation. And there were times when I said, well, wait a second now. How could he be running 45 miles an hour? And then when you read this
his attorneys tear it to shreds.
Every single thing, point by point, including the interrogations of Barry and the statements that he made. He said, wait a minute, he said X, and now you're interpreting it out of the context of the conversation. That type of thing. And suddenly, your mind is blown.
It is. And even the dark, what they called the dark cap, they even say, you literally lied and called it a dark cap, and it is a syringe cap.
Yeah.
And it's found not mixed up in the sheets the way they would have had you believe, the sheets of this bed, that this bedding had been stripped. Yes, the bedding was found in the dryer, but the syringe cap was found 9 to 10 days later.
In an empty dryer.
In an empty dryer by an investigator, and his was the only DNA found on that cap when they tested it.
Now, Suzanne had a chem port. She had
for chemo.
Beaten cancer. She had this port. She was still on, a maintenance kind of dose. Is it possible that she was given a needle and syringe and her medication to inject herself?
I don't know anything about a chem port. I don't know if that would make it easier, harder.
Chemo port, so you walk into the hospital, they put your medication in, and boom, you don't have to keep sticking you with needles.
Was she? The thing I don't know though for a fact is if she was still taking medication.
I believe I read that she was doing, to prevent recurrence, that they taper down.
Or maybe she gave it to herself.
Yeah, maybe, but that's how I'm really reaching here. I'm just looking for other reasons.
Okay.
Because dart cap is a funny word.
Well, because they believe that he shot her with a dart gun. That's why, again, they're framing everything within this very specific box.
Yes.
And then the second it doesn't, and that's what I keep saying, I don't even know that it happened in that box. But they have basically boxed themselves out of everything else.
Yeah.
So Barry makes this amazing case. He's suing them. He's asking for $15 million because of what they put him through.
He was in jail.
He was in jail. His daughters are standing by his side. And then Suzanne gets found.
3 years later.
Breaking news.
Colorado mom who went missing on Mother's Day.
Suzanne Morphew.
Suzanne Morphew.
Suzanne Morphew's body has been found.
Suzanne is found south of where they live in the town of Moffett, and they don't find her because they're looking for her. And what's so interesting is when they dropped the charges against Barry, they said, we're doing this because we only get one shot. We're really confident we know where she's going to be. We just haven't found her yet. But they were not looking for her when they found her.
That's right.
They were looking for a woman named Edna Quintana. She had gone on a hike with her boyfriend, and her boyfriend said that she couldn't keep up. She goes back to the car. She's not the car when he gets there, and he never sees her again. Doesn't mention that to her family when they're looking for her, but mentions it later when he has her phone and her purse.
Yeah.
So they are out there doing a search for her. Now, while they were searching for Edna, they had actually found another missing person, James Montoya. According to his family, James was scheduled to go to the Marines the day after he had gone missing. But it's now believed that he met some people he didn't know while on this night out, one of them being Jesus Angel Arvizo of Denver. And investigators say that he got a ride with this guy and maybe a group of people. An argument breaks out, and then Jesus shoots and kills James. I don't know how they have all this information, I assume from witnesses, but he's on the run. So that case, they're still looking for that guy. But so they're looking for Edna, they find James, and then they find another body, which I'm sure for a moment they think is Edna. But what was left, 3 years later, her port was there. And there had to have been that moment where they actually knew what they had found. And after some DNA testing, it's confirmed that it is Suzanne. So they found her in an area nobody was even looking. And then what they find from the autopsy results, just when we're all man, Barry got railroaded, they find BAM in her bone marrow.
That's
and they say that she died from BAM. And so if you could help us break down what it is they found, how they found it, what it means, how significant is this?
Oh, so very. This is mind-blowing. Now, there's no flesh left. You understand, she's out there 3 years in the desert. There's torn clothing. There's bones. There's some animal bones mixed in. And some of the bones from Suzanne are missing. This is animal activity, okay? What's left to test? There's not a scrap of flesh. So people say, you can test the marrow. Nope. Marrow starts to decay after 12 weeks, is pretty much useless. She's been there 3 years. But you can go to the ends, the femurs. In the top of the femur and the very bottom of the femur, there's large areas with trabecular bone inside it. That's where all the blood vessels go through. And in there, you can find DNA even after years and years. They test that DNA, and sure enough, it is Suzanne. They also identify her initially, right from the autopsy, before DNA was done, by forensic odontology. They have her dental records. They compare them to the dental work that's left within the mandible, and they identify her right then and there. Confirm with DNA. And even better, there's toxicology. You can get toxicology out of that trabecular bone. Miraculous. I mean,
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, obviously you want blood. That's the number one. Number two, if you can get some flesh, some bone marrow, but bone is good.
Why is it that one is better than the other? Does blood hold stuff?
You know, you got the liquid, it's right there, and it's full. It is full concentration. In trabecular bone, you know, the process, and again, I'm not a DNA scientist, so, you know, the grinding down of it, the extraction of it from bone tissue is just not going to yield the results that nice fresh blood does. But what do we find in that trabecular bone? What do we find? A anesthetic, a tranquilizer, uses an antipsychotic, by the way, and a deep, deep narcotic, major. Like, it's said that medetomidine is like 7 times stronger than fentanyl or some crazy thing like that. I don't have the exact number. But this is what's used in combination to sedate big animals.
Yeah.
You know, a bear attack, a deer, you know, any of these things.
Yeah, these aren't just like 3 random drugs, right?
No.
And these were specifically the 3 drugs that they had theorized very early on that Barry had used, that Barry admitted to having used to shoot deer with.
That's right.
At the end of April.
Yeah, the combination is called BAM, and that is used by people to stop animals. And Barry said, oh, yeah, I used that to get deer, to remove their antlers. So we have toxicology, and this is mind-blowing because now we have not a cause of death, because all we have is bones. And when they look at those bones very carefully, you know, they have a forensic anthropologist, the medical examiner there, the coroner, they did a really good job. They had the forensic odontologist, they have the anthropologist, and they go in and they look at the bones, and they look for things like bullet holes, saw marks, knife. You know, a knife, as you plunge it into someone's chest, it nicks a rib, right? They're looking for all these things. They don't find any evidence of perimortem injury, in other words, around the time of death. There's something very interesting in that toxicology, and that is that they found metabolites of those 3 drugs. When you have a drug in your body, your liver, your kidneys, metabolizes it, breaks down the substance so that it's excreted from your body eventually. So in order to metabolize a drug, you have to be alive for a little bit, don't you? So she was sedated with the BAM and then lived for a bit.
Which I find interesting because one of the things that people who believe, and Barry's defense team, people who believe he was railroaded, he's innocent, one thing they'll point to is that cadaver dogs were eventually brought in to the home, to Suzanne's car, to that Bobcat, to Barry's car, and they did not hit on anything. Well, I think one time it was like the 3rd or 4th time they brought in a cadaver dog, it hit on like something random. And of course, that's the one thing that made it into the arrest affidavit. But then we learn about all the times that the dog didn't hit on anything, especially not in his truck. Like, how would he have transported her? Nothing could have happened in the home. It had to have happened on the bike ride. But then you think about, well, what if she wasn't dead? What if she was just sedated?
Sedated. Cadaver dogs find the off-put of human decay, of decomposition, the aminoles, whatever they're called. And so cadaver dogs, if a person's alive and sedated, they're not going to be able to track that person. A tracking dog could. But of course, Suzanne lived there, so what's to track?
Right.
So we have cadaver dogs? No. We're seeing then that she probably was not dead and decomposing in her home. Was she sedated? Yes. Now, again, I have to say, we don't have the toxicology report.
Which is so frustrating,
isn't it? It's killing me because we need quantitation, not just the fact that the drug is there, but the quantity and the quantity of metabolites. How long was it between the time she was sedated? It's a very, very important piece of evidence. And the anthropology report. Good God, do I need that? I need to know where the clothing was found. Now, what's really interesting to me is you want to talk about the magic bullet. They found right then and there a weathered bullet.
They don't say if it's been spent or
No,
unspent.
They don't. Is it a bullet with a cartridge, or is it an actual bullet fired from a gun? And it just happens to be right there with Suzanne. And the FBI takes 5 fragments of clothing and the bullet. Why? Those fragments of clothing, they're going to examine microscopically to see if there's any gunpowder residue, any smear from the bullet, any fibers that are burnt at the edges, indicating that she was shot. Because we don't have any evidence in the skeleton that she was shot.
That doesn't mean she wasn't.
Of course not, because, soft tissue.
Yeah.
And so the FBI is holding in their hands that treasure trove. Is it possible that that bullet just happened to be there? As I said before, anything's possible, but is it probable?
Moffat is the middle of freaking nowhere.
That's right.
I mean, what? And again, but to be fair,
we
did just find potentially a sexual predator's DNA on her car. And it's like, if anything can happen, it might happen in this case.
That's right. And maybe it was a shooting range area. Maybe people went out there to shoot their guns. But in that case, you would find a lot of bullets, wouldn't you? You'd find shell casings. You wouldn't just find a bullet next to a dead woman missing 3 years.
Now, I wish they would. I know they have more information because the defense has kind of like thrown bits and pieces out within just like when they do interviews, because they say something about her having caffeine in her system as well. I don't know.
Caffeine and the chemotherapeutic agents. So we know she was still taking.
That's how. Okay.
Yeah.
So they're saying. So again, they're telling us the stuff that works for them. So they're saying she had caffeine, and they're like, there was this coffee cup there that morning that was half drank. It had only Suzanne's DNA on it. That proves that she was alive and well that morning when, according to the police's theory, she should already have been dead. So yes, caffeine. I want to know, did she have any other drugs in her system? Again, Barry has made allegations that she was abusing her antidepressants. So
no, they would have mentioned those in the toxicology.
You would think.
Oh, of course. No, you have to. Well, wait a second. They didn't give us the full report.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a reason for that.
That's what I don't know.
But then why did they tell us the 3 most important things? The BAM.
Because they're saying that's what led to her death, right?
Right.
Is that in their summary?
Yes. What they called it is, and this is an interesting thing, normally, someone asked, why is the autopsy report so short? Well, because all we have is bones. We have no internal organs. And then they say here that the final diagnosis is homicide by unspecified means, in other words, unknown, in the setting of BAM. Let's call it BAM.
Yeah.
Intoxication. Okay? So what do they mean in the setting of? It means this shouldn't be. So if you're found dead in the street and they can't figure out why you're dead, there's no bullet wounds, no trauma, no nothing, but it's in the setting of being dumped in a dumpster head down, that's not looking good.
Yeah.
So in other words, this is not correct. This is not what should be. A person shouldn't be laying in the desert.
And no one should have BAM in their system, something that is prescribed by a veterinarian.
For animals.
Yeah.
Right.
The thing that, again, we get bits and pieces through the news because they just say that she's got the weathered bullet and then some clothing that has kind of, disintegrated with time as well. But they don't say what clothing. The defense has said, they'll just kind of offhandedly say her biking clothes. I don't know if that's true.
No, it's not exactly. Yeti shorts. I do have a description, from the autopsy. On external examination, they're presented with 3 paper bags. Biological evidence is always kept in a paper bag, not plastic. Okay, so we have Jane Doe, day 1. Jane Doe, day 1 bag, skull, 2 bags. Then the 3rd bag is county day 2 and 3. So they searched for 3 days before they got all the bones and evidence. Animals scatter the bones. Now, it says which bones they have. We have some missing. We have the Metaport, the Chemoport purple medical device. And now we have a pale patterned balaclava. Isn't that thing you wear around your neck or you could put all over your head? Okay, we find that. We found a pink and light color leather work glove, a light color padded bra, ripped dark blue gray hooded sweatshirt with it says Crested Butte on it, a torn green Nike tank top, Yeti shorts, and a fabric fragment.
That's not her biking clothes.
No, she wears the padded.
And nobody who's doing serious mountain biking is doing it in a sweatshirt.
Yeah. So maybe I don't know what Yeti is. Maybe it does have padding, and where is her water? You don't go hiking in the mountains without water. Yeah, exactly. All right, and then we have, handed over to the FBI, the fabric fragments, the weathered bullets. It's a puzzler.
It's interesting, and there hasn't been much from. I always come back to his daughters just out of sympathy more than anything else because they were so adamant and they stood by their dad.
Yeah,
and they lost their mom. I mean, they're.
How much more tragedy do you need here? You know? It's awful.
I just don't know what they think now that they have this. They haven't made any statements, and they might still be standing by their dad. And Barry's lawyers are still saying that he is a man to stand by because they put out a statement afterwards that basically said this should call for a reinvestigation.
It should.
Yes,
absolutely.
And it should be done by somebody who wasn't involved with the first one because it was so tainted. And they should stop thinking about Barry and focus on whoever actually did this. And there is somebody who potentially has assaulted other women out there, and there's all these open-ended questions. And right now, everything is a little bit in limbo. As of this recording, they haven't decided. Her body was found in the 12th district. She went missing from the 11th. So they're wondering if the 12th is going to be the one to actually prosecute it, which potentially could be the best option since they weren't involved in that whole first part of everything. It's
a huge mystery. It really is. And what's interesting too is, did they see anything in Barry's car on his telematics that showed, or his GPS that showed the car going down to this area where the body was found?
No, so not in the days, because again, they went through those telematics backwards and forwards for this window, this very specific window. They did not pull the telematics on her Range Rover. So on the other car in the home. And the thing that I was running around wild with this case, like running to our producer and like with this paper in my hand, and they had all the GPS coordinates from where his truck had been. And so I went back farther, and there's no date, but they also say, here are the places it's been over time. And it could have been years before. But it shows that his truck at some point was in Crestone, Colorado, which is right by Moffett. I mean, the coordinates are almost overlapping with one another. There's nothing down there. Moffett is a town of between 100 and 200 people. I mean, there's no reason to go there. So I'm really interested to learn why he went down there at some point. What was he doing in Moffett? Because I know for a fact his truck was in Crestone, which is right by Moffett.
Right. But when was that and why?
We don't know that. And mostly because all the data we have, or at least the data that's been released, was just in that like very short time before she went missing, the time that fits into their window.
Yeah, they chose a window.
I don't think he took his, if it was him, and I'm not saying it's Barry, I don't think he would have taken his truck. They know that he didn't in the time. I also don't know when she was last seen alive. This is like, I'm going to lose my mind over this one.
Yeah, this case has got me going back and forth, back and forth. There are so many unanswered questions, and there's nothing worse than not knowing.
And is he awful, or is he? I think of Scott Peterson, where it's just like, is it possible that you are just the most unlucky man alive right now, and that you can be an awful husband and not a great guy and
still not be a murderer?
Yeah, and all these things make you just look so guilty. But what's wild is if it is BAM, and if it is what they thought it was, but it didn't fit into that box. Like, this is what really sucks about a department being dishonest about the way they get to the end. The end doesn't justify the means, because the means keep the end worth something.
Yeah.
And right now, everything they've done, even if they were right, I don't know that
It's tainted.
it's tainted. And
You
what
lie
about
once,
Suzanne?
and that's it.
what about Suzanne at the end of all of this?
Yeah, at the end of the day, a woman lost her life, and her daughters lost their mother. And a husband's wife is gone, and we'll never know what all it led to.
So there's still hope for Suzanne's case, depending on a reinvestigation. To touch on the other cases I even mentioned, Suzanne has gotten a ton of coverage.
Mm-hmm.
Those other cases really haven't. And so I think for James Montoya, it's important to remind people that they are still looking for the man who killed him. Jesus Angel Arvizo, who they believe could be hiding out in the Alamosa area. There was a woman who was also arrested on September 5th of 2023 in connection with James's death and formally charged with accessory to first-degree murder after the fact. So the family has been asking the public's help in finding the man who killed their family member. So if you have information, you can call the Metro Denver Crime Stoppers at 720-913-7867. There's a $2,000 reward available for information leading to an arrest. And Edna, the woman whose search led to these two other people being found, she is still missing. It's important to note that her boyfriend has not been called a suspect. What we know is that she was last seen on May 3rd of 2023 in the area of Saguache County. So if you know anything about her disappearance, please call the CBI tip line at 719-416-5815. Thank you once again for joining me. For those that haven't listened to our previous episode, you can find that on the SiriusXM app. And if you didn't listen to our previous episode, again, we've kind of alluded to Barbara's book, but Barbara, you wrote a book called What the Dead Know. I finished it in 2 days. It was unbelievable, especially for a crime junkie. You not only talk about your life, but the cases that you have seen. The unbelievable, you would think they come from a TV show cases that you've seen in your career.
Yep.
Where can they find that?
Wherever you buy your books, and Amazon and local bookstores and Barnes & Nobles and every place else.
And where can they follow you? Because you're doing some amazing things. You've alluded to in our last episode, you got some TV stuff happening. You have your book. You're kind of all over the place. They're going to want to be best friends with you like I am now.
Thanks. You can find me at Barbara Butcher Official. That's my website. You can find all kinds of information there. And you can write to me or on Instagram at butcher.barbara. And butcher is spelled like where you buy the meat.
Just like the butcher. All right, don't forget to follow this show, add it to your library, and don't forget to follow Crime Junkie as a whole. We've got a brand new episode the last Friday of every month, but if you can't wait until then, you can head to Crime Junkie Radio on SiriusXM on the app for your 24/7 true crime fix. And if you want to follow me, Ashley Flowers on Instagram, Ashley Flowers Crime Junkie on TikTok, and also head over to Instagram and follow Crime Junkie Podcast. We're doing a ton of stuff over there as well. And I'll be back next month. Crime Junkie AF.